Hello and welcome back everybody. Today we're going to be going over 5 very strong builds for the driller without any overclocks. This is aimed for more has 4 and has 5, so if you're struggling on has 4 and has 5, try out these builds and hopefully you find one of them that you like. The very first one that we're going with is a very basic driller, but it's also a pretty strong driller. So for a primary weapon we are taking the Flamethrower, and a secondary weapon we are taking the Subata. So let's go over this. In tier 1 I'm running extra tank capacity. This makes it so we get 25 more tank size, so we go from 50 to 75. Our other option here is longer reach, which is also really good. In tier 1 there really isn't a bad option. Pick whichever one you like more. Longer reach can be really useful on robot missions because you can reach turrets on the ceiling easier. It can also be useful if you have MacLeod plague because it's easier to hit them when they're flying. In tier 2 we're going with extra damage. This will buff up our damage from 11 damage per tick to 15 damage per tick, so we can kill big things a little bit faster. However, you could go with any of these in tier 2. They're all really good. You go with the sticky flame build, or you go with the heat build-up build. If you're going against robots, I'd recommend the heat in tier 2. That really helps. In tier 3, we're going with extra tank size, as well as in tier 4, we're going with extra tank size. You're rarely going to be running low on ammo with this build, and if you are, that means practically everybody else on your team is probably running low on ammo too, or completely out of ammo. And then in tier 5 we're going with heat radiance. This is just so that we can light things around us on fire a little bit quicker. If you don't like this and you want some potentially extra damage, you can go with targets explode. Targets explode is potentially more damage, but it only triggers when the flamethrower's direct fire kills something. So if sticky flames kills something, then that does not trigger targets explode. So keep that in mind. For a secondary, we're running the Subata, and the Subata I have set up like this. Subata is also a very basic weapon, and this build is no exception to that. So we're running faster reload speed in tier 1, but any of them in tier 1 are quite good. Pick whichever one you like. I just like having this so we can keep firing this more often, since I'm not usually running Born Ready. But if you do want to run Born Ready, this is a really good set to run it with. Running extra ammo in tier 2, you could run extra damage if you want. If you don't find that you need extra ammo, then that's perfectly fine. Extra ammo in tier 3, same type of reason. Extra weak spot damage in tier 4, this will get you more damage than just going with the extra damage, so long as you're hitting things in the weak spot, because the bonus weak spot damage is pretty nice. Spot already has a base 20% bonus damage when hitting a weak spot, so this takes it up to 80%. And then since we're bringing the flamethrower, we're also bringing volatile bullets, so when things are on fire, we're going to be doing even more damage to them and keeping the fire on them longer. So this build is probably the most straightforward out of our builds, and it's basically use the Subata at anything that you can't use the flamethrower on. So long as things are in flamethrower reach, just use the flamethrower on them, keep it on them until they're dead, or until you're out of fuel with the flamethrower, and then if things are at long range, use the Subata. Usually I run around just with the Subata out because it doesn't block up the screen as much, and I can just fire this at web spitters, acid spitters, MacTerra. You do have kind of a weakness towards ranged enemies just in general. As driller, you don't have a great way of dealing with them, at least if they want to stay at very long range. Menaces can be kind of a pain for you, so you're just going to have to make do with your Subata for that. But anything at close range, the flamethrower will take care of really well. This build also doesn't do incredibly well against dreadnoughts. That's the one thing the flamethrower doesn't do really well at, besides anything outside of its reach, because you can't actually light them on fire. You can still make this work against dreadnoughts, but it's going to be dealing less damage and it's not going to be as effective as your other two primary options. So let's move on to your equipment. First up, we got the drills, and the drills I have set up for the left-hand side. So for tier 1, I'm going with barbed drills. This gets us more damage with our drills, and you will want to be using your drills as actual weapons in this. The drills are really good. They count as melee damage, so even though it says that they do 10 damage a hit, they usually do more than that since most things are weak to melee damage. They have fear on them, and they have maximum armor break on them too, so you can just shred the armor off of anything with these, as well as there's a good chance that it will try to run away if you start hitting it with the drills. So be sure to do that. In tier 2, I have the faster cooldown for the drills. This is just so when I'm not using them, they cool down a little bit quicker. Tier 3, faster mining because that's their only option. And then in tier 4, extra fuel so that we can potentially mine even further. It's really good for drilling to the exit if need be. The drills are pretty straightforward, but there's actually a lot of things that you can do with them. You can also use these to block projectiles, which is kind of nice. So if you see a spitballer firing at you, you can actually just pull these out and rev them up. They're really good against swarmer drones, so if there is any swarmers, be sure to use them for it. You can also dig underneath turrets and kill them, at least blaster turrets. For some reason it doesn't work with the shield turrets, I'm not sure why. If you don't find that you need extra ammo though, in tier 4 you could go with the bloody cold drills. And so long as you're hitting things with your drills, any sort of enemy, you won't be able to overheat your drills. You're going to run out of fuel before you overheat your drills, so long as you're constantly hitting enemies with it. Next there's our satchel charges, our C4, and for this I generally take them just for mining. You can usually build them a couple different ways though. You could build them for damage, or you could build them for mining, or you can build them for kind of crowd control stun effect. So in tier 1 I'm running extra C4, so we get another one of them. In tier 2, we're running kill switch because that's our only option, so we can pick up our C4. That is kind of nice. Makes it so we're not wasting it if we don't toss it in quite the right area. going with extra ammo in tier 3, and then going with mining in tier 4. This is just basic mining C4. You use it to blow up any sort of materials, or to open up eggs or whatever it might be, to blow open dirt walls. Just be careful with your C4 because it is pretty easy to blow yourself up with, especially since you have the larger radius. If you want to go with more damage, you could go with a combination of ammo and damage in tier 1 and 3. You could go full damage. That can work pretty well. It can do really high damage to dreadnoughts or to the caretaker. And alternatively in tier 4, you could either go with the fear or with the stun. That way if you don't kill something, you likely stun it or scare away everything else in the area. You could also go with larger AoE in tier 1 too if you want more of a crowd control build, and then something like the fear. And then for our suit, I'm running my usual suit build. It should look familiar if you've seen the other videos like this. So in tier 1, pick whatever you'd like. I go with the larger bag size. I really like having 5 more. The other 2 options are fine though too. Tier 2, I go with healthy. This just gets us more health overall and makes it so we can tank through a bit more damage. It's really good against burst damage. Shields can be okay if you're not taking a lot of burst damage, but usually on the higher difficulties you are. So I find health to be a bit more useful than the shields. For tier 3, we got the fire resist for driller, which is really good. There's quite a few things that can hit you with fire. It makes it so magma core is not nearly as annoying as it otherwise would be, and you're actually immune to the floor fires in magma core, so that's pretty awesome. You can also potentially survive a bulk detonator blowing up next to you. You have to be on the very edge of it, but the fire probably won't kill you afterwards, as long as you survive the explosion, which is kind of nice. It's actually a little bit better if you got like a ghost detonator, since then it's all fire. And then we're going with breathing room in tier 4. Breathing room makes it so once we get picked up, we have 6 seconds of invulnerability where we can't be injured from anything. Very useful, especially if you need to get a resupply, or if you need to get health back from vampire, which is really good on driller because you have quite a few options for melee. I would recommend you buy everything with the suit right away though. Buy just everything even if you don't plan on using it, because you will get extra health overall from this. Alright, then let's talk about driller's throwables. First up, we got the impact axe, arguably one of the best, if not the best throwable in the entire game. It is really good. You get 8 of these. You can pick these up if you throw them and don't hit anything, or sometimes if you do hit something and it's at low health and you kill it anyway. The impact axe kind of uses 2 different types of damage. It uses area damage and it uses direct damage, and this counts as melee damage, which makes it even better against most enemies, and it also functions with the vampire perk, which is really good. They also stun whenever you hit with them on anything that can be stunned, so if there's a Praetorian about to spit, throw this into its face and it won't be spitting anymore, it'll be stunned there for a second. But if you call in a resupply and you have more than 4 of them, throw the remaining ones into the floor, either next to the resupply or next to an objective that you would like to do, and then that way you can go and pick them back up later. Up next, we got the high explosive grenade, which the high explosive grenade did get buffed recently, which is awesome. It actually does decent damage now. It has really good armor breaking, and now you can actually cook the grenades, which is really useful. You weren't able to do that before, which made them really inconsistent. Now they are very consistent. So if you want a standard grenade from any other game and you're used to cooking grenades in any other game, the high explosive grenades should feel really easy for you to use, and they're a really good option now. And then we've got the neurotoxin grenade. Neurotoxin grenades are a little bit odd. You throw them out, they spray out neurotoxin, which can kind of cover a big area, and it makes it difficult to see there. The neurotoxin is flammable, so if you burn it, it will cause a big fire explosion, similar to how the death clouds from the Praetorians or Oppressors can be. Works pretty much the same way. Everything affected by the neurotoxin takes damage over time. It's also kind of highlighted from the neurotoxin, and they are also slowed while being affected by the neurotoxin by 30%. That's the big advantage of having neurotoxin, is the slowdown, if I'm being honest, and it's usually best if you just want to stack slowdowns, because you can stack sticky flames to make slowdowns, or you can stack the sludge pump to make slowdowns. So if you're running either of those, it can work with this. It's less useful with the fire because of the explosion, but it will still cause a little bit more damage over time. It's better with the sludge pump. You can even combine it further with something like persistent plasma from the EPC if you have that overclock too. And then our last and most recent grenade for driller, or grenade, is the spring-loaded ripper. This is the saw blade, the lawnmower that you throw out and it goes crazy and can kill a lot of things, including teammates and yourself. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be for team damage. It used to do an insane amount of team damage. Now it's a lot less than what it used to be. So you get 6 of these. They do high damage. They cover a pretty good area. They're best used inside tunnels and around objectives where you can kind of throw them on and they'll just go around. They can also be used against crowds pretty well. They're not the best against single large enemies though. Something like your axes are a bit better, or your frag grenades are a bit better for that. Alright, moving on from our first build, we're going to the second build, and this time we're going to be using the Cryocannon as our primary weapon and the Wave Cooker as our secondary. So for the Cryocannon, we have this set up as a very simple freezing build. In tier 1 we're going with extra freeze, so we can freeze things a little bit quicker. You could go with the other two options though in tier 1, they're all pretty good. Going with longer reach in tier 2, this makes it so we can hit flying things and things on the ceiling a little bit easier. That definitely helps, because if you freeze anything that is flying with the Cryocannon, regardless of how big it is, it will die as soon as it's frozen. Tier 3, we're going with the faster rate of fire, but the other option in tier 3 is pretty decent too. This just gets us a little bit more DPS and can also freeze things a little bit quicker than we otherwise would. In tier 4, we're going with extra ammo because it gives us a lot of ammo, and running out of ammo is not really a good thing. And then in tier 5, we're running Cold Radiance, which works the same way as Heat Radiance does for the Flamethrower, except for this freezes. This can be really useful if you get tunnel vision, because you can just be aiming in one general area and not have to worry about things coming directly up behind you. You can potentially freeze them as well. You do have to be a little bit careful though with things like the explosive plants. This can cause them to blow up, and that can be a little bit dangerous to you. Once you've frozen things with the Cryocannon, you have a couple options. You can continue to spray the Cryocannon at them until they're dead. That is one option. You can also use your other weapons to kill them quicker too, which is mostly what we're going to be using our secondary for, but your drills work really well against frozen enemies as well. Your pickaxe and your impact axes do too. Really any of your grenades will, besides I guess Neurotox not doing so much. We are running this as a thermal shock build, so our basic idea is going to be to freeze things, pull out the wave cooker, shoot into crowds that are frozen, and cause the thermal shock status effect to kill them. The way that we have the wave cooker built is like this, so going with extra ammo in tier 1, that way we just have more battery life. Tier 2, we're going with the heat sink. This is less heat generation. Tier 3, we're going with the slowdown, although you can pick whichever one you want in tier 3. Tier 4, we're going with the wider lens, but you can pick whichever one you'd like in tier 4. You actually don't even need to pick one of these in tier 4. If you don't like switching to either one of them, you could just leave this blank. And then in tier 5, we're going with the exothermic reactor. This makes it so if things are on fire and we use the wave cooker on them, this will freeze them, causing the thermal shock status effect, and if they're frozen, this will heat them up, causing the thermal shock status effect. So that's going to be our main way of using this. This build is extremely ammo efficient. It takes you forever to run out of shots, and it works well on most mission types. And then if you run into big things and you're running something like the impact axes, freeze it, throw a couple axes into it, and then break it with the wave cooker. That can also do really high damage. For our third build, we're going to be taking the Corrosive Sludge Pump as our primary weapon, and this way we have it built for an AoE build. So in tier 1, we have longer puddle duration. We're going to be mostly using charge shots with this to kind of deal with crowds. So our puddles will last longer, we can potentially get more DPS out of that. In tier 2, we're going with larger puddle fragments, so we can have even more of an area covered than we otherwise would. In tier 3, we're going with extra ammo. However, you could take the longer lasting sludge too. That one works too with this build in tier 3. I like the more ammo though. In tier 4, we're going with better ammo efficiency, so we use up less shots when we're using our charge shots. And then in tier 5, we are taking the extra slowdown, so anything in our sludge is slowed down even more. Very straightforward. You're just going to want to use this for charge shots for crowds, use regular shots against everything else. Regular shots work pretty well against big enemies as well, and you don't really need to be aiming for any sort of weak spot with the sludge pump, which is really useful. And then for a secondary weapon, we're going to be taking the EPC, and we're going to be building it for fire, so we can light our sludge on fire and do more damage per second over time. So in tier 1, we're going with extra ammo, but any of them in tier 1 are fine. Pick whichever one you'd like. Tier 2, we're going with faster projectile speed with normal shots. This just makes it so it's a little bit quicker to hit enemies at a distance, because we are kind of lacking distance with this build. We're not that great at long range. Faster charge speed in tier 3, but any of them are fine in tier 3. Pick whichever you'd like. Extra ammo in tier 4, so we can shoot this even more. And then the new Burning Nightmare in tier 5. So Burning Nightmare gives us fire damage on both our regular shots as well as our charge shots. You can use either one that you would like to light your sludge on fire. Usually I use charge shots to fire it at something in the sludge to light multiple things on fire. For our fourth build, we're going to go back to using the Flamethrower, although the Cryocannon can also work for this, because we're going to kind of be using it for the same thing. This is a slowdown build for the Flamethrower, so we're running Sticky Flames. In tier 1, pick whichever one you would like. I'm going with extra tank size once again, just so that we can have more fuel, but if you like longer reach, you can go with that. Tier 2, we're going with longer duration to Sticky Flames. This will make them last for 3 seconds longer, so they last for 5 seconds when they're on the ground. In Tier 3, we're going with more slowdown, so anything stuck in the Sticky Flames is just slower in general. Tier 4, you could go with even more duration if you want for Sticky Flames, but I'm going with tank size, so we have a little bit more sustain overall. And then in Tier 5, we are once again going with Heat Radiance. You really don't want to go with Targets Explode for this one, because a lot of the time our Sticky Flames are going to be doing the job and killing things, and we can't trigger it too often unless we want to hold the Flamethrower on it. For this one, you're going to want to blow fire in a general area, try hitting the ground, shooting directly underneath enemies, and just kind of zigzagging it back as you move further away from enemies. This will make it so when they're walking through, they're slowed down, they're taking more damage, and they're likely catching on fire, so taking even more damage. For the EPC, we're running it like this. We're running extra ammo in tier 1 and 4. This is so that we actually have ammo, because when you're first trying to learn EPC mining, you're going to screw it up a lot, and you're going to be running through ammo a lot. That's just how it works. It's difficult to get used to, but once you do get used to it, you're going to be far more ammo efficient. Just having extra ammo helps a lot too, so you can just do it more often. In tier 2, we're going with faster cooldowns. This just makes it so when you're trying to use the EPC for mining, it's a little bit more lenient. You don't have to worry about it as much, and I think that helps quite a bit. You could go with a faster projectile speed here if you're already used to using the EPC for mining and you just want faster regular shots, so you can use this at range to kill flying things or kill ranged enemies like acid and web spitters. That's perfectly fine too. I would recommend, if you're trying to do this for mining though, try out the first option in tier 2. That will help. Faster charge speed in tier 3. This one I just really like. You could go with better ammo efficiency in tier 3 as well. This way I just find it's a little bit quicker, so I can actually use it during combat a little bit easier. And then in tier 5 we are going with the thin containment field. This is what allows you to use your EPC for mining. So for this you have to use a charge shot, fire it, and then shoot a regular shot at the charge shot without overheating your weapon. And then once that regular shot hits the charge shot, it will cause the charge shot to explode, dealing actually a lot of damage to everything in the circle, as well as cutting apart any of the land that's around there, which is why you can use it for mining. And then our 5th and final build is more of a dreadnought build. We're going to be taking the Sludge Pump as our primary weapon and the Subata as our secondary. For the Sludge Pump, I have it set up like this, so we're running extra tank size in tier 1. This just lets us shoot out more before we need to reload. Pretty nice. Tier 2, we're running extra damage on regular hits. That can be really useful because you're probably going to be spamming regular hits, especially on dreadnoughts. In tier 3, we're running extra ammo. This one's just really nice so you don't run through ammo so fast. In tier 4, faster charge up on those charge shots. You could go with extra ammo efficiency though too if you want. Either way works. You can still use the Sludge Pump for crowds and just use the charge shots for them. That's usually what I do with this. And then going with the acid in tier 5 so that we do a little bit more DPS over time. For a secondary weapon, we're running Subata and we're running it for full damage. So we don't really have that much ammo with this, but we are doing a decent amount of damage per shot. So faster reloads in tier 1, but any of them tier 1 are fine. Extra damage in tier 2, extra damage in tier 3. You could run ammo on one of these too. That would also be fine. Then I'm running extra weak spot damage in tier 4. You could run regular shot damage in tier 4 though too, if you don't really care about hitting weak spots too much. And then just spam this at anything that you see. And then we're going with the acid tipped rounds in tier 5, so we're doing a little bit of extra acid damage on every shot. This is pretty useful because it gets us 2 more damage, and most things are weak to acid. We're already using acid with our corrosion as well, so we should eat away the armor of enemies pretty quickly and then still be able to do pretty good damage with the Subata. It's also surprisingly good for picking off certain things at a distance. If you build it like this, you can actually one-shot web spitters in the head on any difficulty, so that's kind of nice. I know that's kind of a weird break point to bring up because usually things like the revolver can body shot them with one shot on any difficulty, but having the Subata being able to one-shot headshot them is actually kind of useful. So those are 5 very strong non-overclock builds for Driller. Tell me your favorite down in the comments below. Tell me if you've tried these out before. Thanks everybody for watching this. I hope it helped you out, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!